Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Philosophy Hour of Literary Tales. I'm your host, Paul Krause, and in this episode, we cover Aristotle's political philosophy. Aristotle is remembered as one of the greatest of the classical philosophers, metaphysicians, and epistemologists, but he was equally, and perhaps, the most important political philosopher of the ancient world. Aristotle's Politics and Ethics are fundamental in political philosophy studies, and his ideas were by and large incorporated into Christian political theory through the rise of Catholicism in the medieval era. Aristotle can aptly be defined as a virtue political theorist. This, of course, emanates from his own theory of happiness that we covered in our episodes on the Nicomachean Ethics. Aristotle's Politics is rooted in his famous declaration, which we also have an episode on, that humans are political, i.e. social, animals. The highest extension or reflection of our social animus is the polis, the realm of the political. Although Aristotle disagrees with Plato that politics and law fundamentally suppress one's ability to have happiness, Aristotle agrees with Plato in rejecting the political ideas of the sophists, who advocate for the ancient equivalent of ethical egoism and self-interested material advancement and acquisition. We will now look at the highlights of Aristotle's Politics to understand the basic gist of Aristotle's comprehensive and wide-reaching political philosophy. The first thing to know about Aristotle is that he believes that political community is naturally forming and accretes from organic development. Humans as social animals, therefore and logically, naturally lead lives in community. Aristotle is not an atomistic individualist. He does not believe that human beings are best when they live alone. He believes that human beings are best and happiest when they live in communities, in social societies, in political realities. And from this living in social reality, laws and institutions of society emerge as the outgrowth of the community and its political order. Laws and institutions codify the lives and the relationships that humans have formed in their social bonds. Thus, Aristotle's political theories are naturally organic and flow from the bottom up, rather than imposed from the top down. While aspects of Aristotle's theory have traces of the social contract theory, which was made more famous in the Enlightenment era, his traces of social contract thought are decidedly anti-sophist and not similar to the social contract theories of Hobbes, Locke, and Spinoza, all of whom assert the essential asociality or even anti-sociality of human nature. Aristotle's social contract emerges from the essential sociality of mankind. For Aristotle, the aim of politics is to establish the good life, the happy life, the virtuous life, in a well-structured and orderly society which permits the highest degree of happiness possible through the acquisition of goods, through the establishment of friendship, and through a reasonable degree of material wealth. This, of course, requires, as we've mentioned in our episodes of the Nicomachean Ethics, cultivating the knowledge of virtue, of good, evil, and human nature, and living it out in one's life. To live the ethical life, to live the virtuous life, is to live the happy and political life. For Aristotle, the state is also the most sovereign association possible. In the minimalist sense, Aristotle is a, quote, statist in the sense that he believes the state is a natural byproduct of human social existence, and that the state is the ultimate arbitrator of conflicts between people. This state includes and encompasses the protection of all other associations which are needed for the highest good of human existence, social happiness, to emerge. It is the state that protects religion. It is the state that protects property rights. It is the state that protects social order, etc., etc. What Aristotle therefore means when he says the state encompasses all other associations is that all other associate organizations in society have their legitimacy within the boundaries and the protection of the state. It is the duty of the state to protect the social relationships and associations that have emerged from our social natures. Again, you must understand that Aristotle's conception of the state is organic and flowing from the bottom up. It is not that the state exists and then creates associations to which it puts us. It is that the state emerges from the social relationships and the organizations and associations that already exist, and the state's most sovereign legitimacy is in the protection of what gave birth to it in the first place. When Aristotle says that man is a political animal, he means that human nature is instinctively communitarian and social. Humans find greater meaning and happiness by belonging to a community. It is only natural. After all, that is what is logically entailed by being a social creature, by having a social nature. Thus, Aristotle rejects the ideas of a solitary, asocial, and atomistic existence. Aristotle is also implicitly rebuking the Cynics and the Epicureans all throughout the Politics, because it is by being virtuous in social and political life that the highest happiness emerges, not the happiness of just being alone and having an intellectual knowledge of things per the Cynics, or living a life of mere bodily, individualistic pleasure for oneself via the Epicureans. It is also important to understand Aristotle's theory of language as it relates to his understanding of politics. The fact that humans are social animals and seek bonding together in community is reflected in the fact that humans have the ability of speech. Speech is meant to bind people together, draw us into a community, and to advance the truth of the world, of nature, and our existence. And in this reality of human language, human community also understands and forms itself in the language that it uses. Common language is the basis of political plurality in Aristotle's account. And language also is indicative of the kind of community that we are living in. In a society of high language, we will have a flourishing society. In a society of low language, of constant cursing and the general bad use of language, for example, a language that is militant, a language that calls for revolution, etc., is ultimately a negative society. It is a society on the cusp of failure. It is a society that is tyrannical. If you want to understand how a society is operating and how healthy a society is, Aristotle says you can look at its language. Aristotle also lays out a historical argument about how society forms. First, there is a union between man and woman which produces the family. The family is the basis of civilization and society, according to Aristotle. It is the most natural association which brings people together. And then from the family develops the household, which includes the extended family. The idea of a so-called nuclear family is not in Aristotle's consciousness. In fact, the idea of a nuclear family is really the product of the last 200 years of the Industrial Revolution. There is no such thing as a nuclear family in Aristotle. What you have is an extended family, because in an age when everyone lived close together and there wasn't much social and geographic mobility, the beginnings of a family, and when the family grew and expanded, it largely stayed in the same place and developed the household. The household then is the organic evolution of the union of man, woman, and the family. The household also embodies a functioning unit of many different parts and people. You have children, you have mother and father, you have grandpa and grandma, and within the unit, within the household unit, everyone has a place and a role to play. Multiple families lead to multiple households, and multiple households eventually constitute the creation of a village, where they form the macro element of our social natures that we often see today: civilization. Civilization, because it is rooted in the family, occurs and manifests itself through this progression of man, woman, family, household, village. And out of the village emerges the polis, the city, which is the combination of many households, many villages, and many families united under a common state. Without the family, there is also no state. It is a simple evolutionary argument. Because our social nature brings us into union with others, man, woman, leading to the family, the evolution of the family into the household, the evolution of households coming together to create a village, the continued progression of multiple villages coming together that constitute a polis, and then the protection of the polis being manifested by the state. The principal reason for such social structuring in man's search for a fuller and happy life is a direct result of this social nature. Again, because human existence flourishes better when it is in the company of others, this naturally draws many human beings to come together. Life is always better in the company of others and with a larger village and a larger state and society than if you were by yourself. But Aristotle also says that too big is a problem. You have to find the balance, the mean, between a well-ordered, large, prosperous society and that which becomes too big to function orderly and properly, and that which is too little to actually produce the wealth, the protection, and the happiness that we all seek. Aristotle also gives us a theory of the function of the state. As we've already mentioned, Aristotle is a statist in the minimalist sense because the state has a legitimate purpose in social and political life and is the byproduct of our social animus. Aristotle argues that the essential part and the essential role of the state is to cultivate order and to cultivate a sense of the mean, the median to which human life and political existence depends. There must be an ideal size for the state, and the state must have the proper laws in place for the protection of society. If the state is too big, it will overwhelm society. If society is too big and the state too small, society will be chaotic. Again, the proper function of the state is to act as an arbiter of conflicts within society and to protect the natural associations that have emerged in society from which the state itself grew from. So while Aristotle is a statist in the minimalist sense, he is also an anti-statist in the understanding that a too powerful, too big, too large state is a problem. And in fact, when the state becomes too large and becomes dictatorial, dictating to humans and to other associations and organizations of how to act, this is improper. This is the state stepping outside of its mean, the proper order of its existence. Continuing to develop his political theories, Aristotle stops to comment on, of course, the three forms of government: monarchy, aristocracy, and constitutionalism, sometimes called democracy or republicanism. All three of these forms are based on a family model. The constitutional model refers to the household and where all persons are equal to each other. Yet there are those who retain household rights and responsibilities, greater responsibility within this relationship. And this, of course, extends to the understanding of the citizenry and who rules in a constitutional society. For instance, it would be improper for children to run a household. Therefore, it would be improper for children, so to speak, to be running a constitutional society. The monarchical model is grounded in the rule of the father over his children, the father over his subjects. In essence, a monarchy is the outgrowth of a household and a family dominated by the pater familias, the rule of the father. Then you also have the aristocratic model. In essence, the rule of the best families or the best individuals within the household. Thus, you see, according to Aristotle, how all forms of government are derived from the family and the household. And thus, you also see implicit in Aristotle's comments on the three forms of government his idea that family is the basis of civilization. Aristotle, therefore, is also showing us how, or at least commentating on how different political societies emerged. In a society that was predominated by the dominance of the father, that produced a monarchy. In societies where the household was egalitarian and responsibility went to the most appropriate or the most responsible individuals regardless of age, although again, it would be improper for children to be running the household, thus it would be improper for children to be running a constitutional society. That is how the constitutional model of governance emerged, that it was basically the rule of the most responsible. Aristocratic societies, the aristocratic mold of government, emerge from the rule of the best family and the best individuals within the household and within a village. And the accidental, the geographic, or the historical circumstances by which this emerged, Aristotle doesn't really go into any great detail on, but we can infer from Aristotle's theory that there could be a lot of contingent historical, social, religious, and environmental reasons for how this all emerged. What Aristotle's main point is that all forms of government, whether monarchy, whether aristocracy, whether constitutional, they ultimately emerge from the family and household cornerstones on which all society is built. Aristotle also talks about how property is the basis of survival and human flourishing. Humans cannot survive without working the land. Thus, property is linked to survival, which leads to our well-being and happiness. And this is why Aristotle gives a definitive argument for why property is natural. Natural property, as he writes in the Greek. Aristotle does not see property, however, as a license for exploitation and endless acquisition. Once again, you have to find the happy mean. If you are by yourself, it would be impossible for you to properly work plots of land that are too large. Likewise, if you are living in a large society, it would be insufficient for that society if it only had a little bit of land to produce and work on. The happy mean is found in all of our actions. It is what we pursue, but the happy mean is also found again in property. Property is natural because, again, we cannot survive without working the land. And when we make our claims to the land, what we are making claims to is our own happiness. Aristotle also talks about slavery and the division of labor. And this is a problem for many moderns because, of course, Aristotle thinks that there are a group of people who are natural slaves. This is predicated on Aristotle's belief that society and the world is ultimately hierarchical in nature, and that everyone will find their place within the hierarchy. And of course, that means natural slaves are at the bottom of the hierarchy. It is not rooted in biology, as modern racism and slavery was, yet when reading Aristotle, we would be remiss not to mention that he does make a place for slavery in his political theory. Aristotle then, as we can see, argues for a social contract politics, a theory of politics rooted in the emergence of state and law and institutions that are ultimately derived from human social nature, the formation of families from that social nature, from which households, villages, and political society developed. That is the basic understanding of Aristotle's political theory. Because humans are social animals, they form communities together. In those communities emerge all the social relationships, associations, and organizations which produce the state and its laws, which in turn reflect and protect those social relationships. Aristotle's understanding of the state is not that the state emerges and then imposes order and laws onto civilization and people, which is the view of the Enlightenment philosophers like Thomas Hobbes, even John Locke, and Baruch Spinoza. It is that the state emerges organically out of the social realities of human existence. In another episode, we will look specifically at Aristotle's arguments on the problems of collectivism in politics.